I get to a place where that bag of tricks is now old because technology has kind of taken the forefront, and probably why we're here today, because you can either keep your old bag of tricks and just start to not be relevant, or you jump on board. I'm not an IT person, I'm not a techie person, but it really is intriguing, the AI space. But looking at just platforms in general, what makes the organization run more efficient? From an efficiency standpoint, optimizing different departments, workflows, bringing in new technology that better serves patients.
Brian and Ross, thanks so much for joining us today. We're super excited to have you guys on the podcast. Brian, jumping in with you, a lot of experience in medicine as a whole. So 20 plus years in healthcare management, been quite the journey. Would love to hear more about where you started and how you got to where you are now.
I think the very first job I actually, from the hospital side to the private practice side, was when I interviewed at Ortho Virginia and Raleigh Orthopaedics. That was the first time since 2005.
Wow.
No, before that, 1998.
Jeez. That's how it should be.
I just kept getting, you need to go into this position. And I was offered the COO position at a hospital, and I actually told my CEO, I'm like, there's no way I can do this. No way. The executive recruiter called me and said, you are going to do this. And I said, but I don't want to do this. And she said, Leslie wants you in the position. You cannot say no, or your career is over in tenant. And I was like, oh, that's nuts. And then as soon as I took the job, within 6 months, I got a call from the corporate COO saying, you're going to Florida and you need to be there in 2 weeks. And I'm like, great, Reynolds. How long am I going to be there? And he's like, oh, you're not coming back. So I was running this, throughput efficiency team of 7 people, and we went to 14 different hospitals between all of South Florida and Alabama. So we went every 6 weeks, and we started doing throughput initiatives in the operating room and pathology. It was actually saving the hospital money, but also something that desperately needed to be done to serve the population. Because 25 years ago, patients didn't, we didn't need patients on the hospital side. Today, that's a totally different story. We are out there recruiting patients because hospitals wouldn't exist, private practices wouldn't exist. So it's been a very interesting journey. And then from there, I was actually pulled into the operating room because the CNO that they had pulled from a hospital in South Carolina was really having a challenge with working with nurses. Operating room is probably the most challenging department in any hospital setting. And so she asked me to help, and I'm like, oh, the only thing I've signed for is capital equipment. I don't have a clue what you guys do in the operating room. But that was actually pretty interesting because I didn't have any knowledge base, I started from ground zero. So it was very interesting to be able to talk to nurses and then try to get into their head like, okay, I can't tell these ladies, because most of them were females, how to do their job because I don't know their job. But what I could do is kind of get them to think differently, and then I'll let them come up with the solution, which was ultimately my solution or the corporate solution, but it was about getting in front of them and letting them. We used an egg timer, and we did 4 agenda items for every meeting. They had 15 minutes, and if they didn't answer it, that would be the very first agenda item the following week, because we needed to move measurements quickly because we were off in 6 weeks. So I ended up rolling off into the operating room space and OBGYN, and it was quite interesting and quite challenging. I used Google to look up surgical procedures because I had no idea. I mean, I had to go to meetings and say, oh, they need an ICU bed or they didn't need an ICU bed. I had no clue. So I used the internet to actually get to where I am today because I would not have a clue about how to run an OR or an ambulatory surgery center. So it's been quite the journey from the hospital to the private practice side. And I was actually walking through every night I even do it today. I go do a little walk around to make sure the TVs are off and lights are off. And I was walking through the men's locker room, and one of the spine surgeons was getting dressed, and he said, hey, Brian, do you want to be the CEO of Palm Beach Orthopedic Institute? And I'm like, yeah, I don't know anything about the private practice side. I know adjusted patient days. I don't know anything about revenue or net revenue. And he's like, well, we've watched you and we've selected you as our CEO about a year ago. And now we have the opportunity to actually hire you. And I said, well, I only know the physicians. I don't know the group, because really in the hospital, you only know the physicians and what they do. So I said, okay, I'll come up and talk to the president of the group and see what it's all about. It was actually a full-fledged interview. The CEO that was leaving, the COO that was currently there, and the president and HR director. And said, have a seat. And I took a seat. And the next thing you know, I was like, I don't know what I'm doing here. I got very nervous, and I was like, I don't know if this is a challenge that I can, overcome, because I didn't really understand the private practice side. I only knew the hospital side, and it's quite a different environment. And before you knew it, I was doing it, and I was in operations primarily, and then started to kind of move away from operations kind of once you kind of hardwire some of the process improvements, and just focused on, trying to gain revenue, gain patient share, access to the practice. And so that's how I got into orthopedics. And then I did that for about 12 years. So I kind of maxed out, and I was like, okay, this is a really easy job, a very good paycheck. But at the end of the day, I'm not challenged. So I needed still to evolve. I was still relatively young. So that's when I started to, I had a headhunter call and asked me to look at Ortho Virginia. And then a week later, Raleigh Orthopaedics. Ortho Virginia was going through that's when they started to merge and become the big Ortho Virginia. So 4 groups had just joined probably like 3 months prior. So I felt it was a little dysfunctional. I wasn't sure I had the skill set to help kind of bring the mergers together. And I just happened to get a call about Raleigh Orthopedic Clinic. So I went to interview there, and I felt like this is more me. Like, they had some challenges, and I thought that I could really bring kind of my bag of tricks and they would be successful. So I did. And then, I get to a place where that bag of tricks is now old, because technology has kind of taken the forefront, and probably why we're here today. Because you can either keep your old bag of tricks and just start to not be relevant, or you jump on board. I'm not an IT person, I'm not a techie person, but it really is intriguing, the AI space. But looking at just platforms in general, what makes the organization run more efficient, from an efficiency standpoint, optimizing different departments, workflows, bringing in new technology that better serves patients. Because as I age, I'm going to become one of those patients. And I don't want the challenges that we have had in both practices of not being able to get through the door, not being able to see a doctor for 3 to 6 weeks. We want same-day access. And that's something that Ross worked a ton on in the last, 3 years, or 3 to 4 years, I guess, in improving operations.
Ross, your career is an amazing story, right? Originally, earliest of days, started as a pharmacy technician, now the COO of Raleigh Orthopaedics. Walk us through a little bit of the timeline of your journey and how you got to where you are now. Yeah,
so I worked as a pharmacy tech through college. That's how I helped kind of pay for my bills and all my wants and needs through college. And I come from a family full of healthcare professionals, doctors, physicians, actually a lot on the mental health side, nurses, all kinds of stuff. So healthcare kind of runs in my blood. So I've known for a long time that I wanted to get into healthcare as well and kind of follow that same pathway. So originally I was going to go the clinical route. I wanted to be a physician assistant. I had struggled with some spine issues early in college, ended up having back surgery. So kind of really learned an appreciation for orthopedics and really wanted to help people like me that were going through what I was going through. So it's really kind of what steered me to go that route. So my first job out of college, because to become a physician assistant, you have to have so many clinical hours before you can even apply for the school. My first job out of college was working as a medical scribe for a hand surgeon. So I was with him throughout the entire patient visit. So I learned a lot of the terminology. I learned how to look at an x-ray and read an x-ray, and obviously, very limited bit of experience there. I was mostly just, documenting what he was saying and what the patient was saying, but obviously you learn a lot through repetition. So I start to pick up on things. Whenever that physician was in the operating room, I would do casting and DME. So fitting braces for patients, and I would moonlight a little bit as a medical assistant as well. So I really kind of touched a lot of things on the clinical side, continued to build up that clinical experience, that knowledge. And then, fast forward a little bit, ended up working at Raleigh Orthopaedics as a DME fitter, a coordinator. So that was in the early days. I'd started just a little bit before Brian came on as the CEO. So the department was really in its infancy at that point.
Sure.
So me and another guy from the bracing company that worked at came on board and helped build out the DME program. So with my counterpart, he was the manager at the time. So he and I had really developed a lot of that. And I got to a point too where I had kind of felt like I had been challenged enough and or was no longer feeling challenged and was ready to look at something different, and really was at a point whether I went to a different practice to try and, get that experience as a manager of a DME department, try and continue to build out other DME departments at other practices, or I needed to go into like a sales role. I didn't really want to do that. So talk about mentors, I approached Brian and basically told him, hey, I would like to do something more, really enjoy working here, enjoy working for you. I think this is a great organization, and I'd really like to stay here. Is there something that we can do? So he said, let me think on it. About a month later, calls me into his office and was like, all right, this is what we're going to do. So he really set me on this journey of experience, right? Learning every part of the organization. So I started in our revenue cycle department. I worked in our call center answering phone calls. Worked in our marketing department, worked as a physician liaison, selling our organization to primary cares, essentially. Hadn't really had any management experience. A position came available to manage our workers' compensation and our MRI department. So I was managing a team of about 10. One of the other department's managers that was over authorizations for surgeries and injections ended up, her husband got a job elsewhere, so she left. So in the interim, I sort of absorbed that. My departments grew, and I just continued to touch everything. I'd worked in our surgery center doing materials and purchasing. I'd driven the courier route. I've touched every part of the organization, and have just continued to add a little bit more to, kind of what Brian was talking about, the bag of tricks. You learn a little bit along the way, and as I've continued to build on top of that, I think that's really what's made me successful. And aside from the mentorship and the guidance, of opening those doors, I think that's a lot of what has made me successful, is because I've touched each part of every department in our organization. So whenever my staff approaches me with a question, they know that whenever I respond, it's coming from a place of experience. I'm not just feeding them some sort of nonsense because, fake it till you make it kind of thing. I actually have some piece of, some trick, or from that bag that I can, apply to that. I'm not just making something up along the way. So,
yeah, textbook degrees doesn't really give you the skill set necessary. And I've always felt like, since I started out as a CNA and ended up as a CEO, I've done the same thing. And I feel like that's the path everyone should take, is do the little stuff, answer the phone, schedule the phone calls, because when there is a new platform, or there is patients can't get in or can't get an appointment, why, because you've done it. So when your staff is complaining, they can't really complain to you because you've sat in their seat. And I think that's how you become successful. And that's how you continue to grow, and you're challenged every day by staff. And I think you have a better leverage if you've done it in the past, or if you've touched it. And I think it makes you a better COO, a better CEO. I mean, Ross has been doing this for about 4 years. And it was, quite a journey for him to get here. Our COO resigned, and I went to the board and I said, I want Ross. And they said, well, I don't know, because they thought of him as a DME fitter.
Sure.
So I said, okay, let's cut a deal. We'll make him the director of operations for, a 500 employee, 29 physician group practice. And so we did that. So we made him director of operations. And I said, but for 3 months, and if he's successful in 3 months and you feel like he's successful, he can become the chief operating officer. And then I forced Ross, and he and I talked about it. I'm like, you need to show your value in every single board meeting, because they would always turn to me as the person of knowledge.
Sure.
And then I would turf it to him. And I said, well, Ross really probably has a better perspective on this than I would. And then Ross would speak. Our past COO never did it. And so she wasn't valued, actually. When she left, the physicians were like, now, I made some comment, there was some ruckus in our office, and I said, I think Ross and I are probably out. And they're like, no, you can't, you have to stay. And then they changed their whole behavior and attitude, and it's because they see the value.
Right.
They're living the value. They're hands off on 99% of the stuff. And we're like, get your hands dirty, because you have to run your business at some point. Right. You should not know how not to run a business. This is your livelihood. Administrators come and go. You're eventually tap out, or you want to evolve, you want to get bigger, you want to do different things in your life, and they need to be involved. But I think getting your hands dirty is ultimately success.
I love that.
In a private practice. And even in a hospital. That's what I did in the hospital. I just kept, my boss gave me engineering, and I said to her, I'm like, I know nothing about boilers or anything. And she's like, neither do I. And then a year into it, she put me into other departments in the hospital, and her first job in healthcare was being over the Department of Engineering. Wow. So it was a test. Yeah. And I won. I passed the test, and that's why she wanted me as a COO. Yeah. So it's amazing. Quite interesting.
Yeah. I mean, it's the very common adage, pressure makes diamonds. Yeah. And I think that's, a lot of what kind of drives us to be successful in what we do, is because we've been pushed to experiences that are uncomfortable, that we don't know anything about. And I think that's what sets people apart, is their ability to take that extra time to learn it, to really see how things work, and really build from there. Because, somebody had to learn it at some point, right? No one is born with a subset of knowledge, Some people can just handle it better than others.
Love that.
And now technology is our challenge, right? Because we're trying to be very patient-centered, make it very easy for the patients to come in, make sure we're collecting every possible dollar we can because of all the regulatory changes, declining reimbursement, high denial rates, making sure that we can appeal the denials appropriately with the right language, with the right documentation. Those are things that we both are like focused 90% of our time on, because operations once you hardwire operations, even the CEO, it's more about staying on top of legislation, what's out there that makes sense, that's legitimate. Right. But right now, technology, and everyone seems to have something. And, our big conversation is we don't want 12 platforms anymore. We want one. And we want, AI is huge. So understanding what AI could do, that was a huge learning curve for me, a lot less for Ross. But it's quite interesting what technology can do, and what the biggest expense line in anyone's P&L statement is human capital. Yeah. Labor is the biggest line item. And I'm not trying to displace employees, but I am wanting to bring technology in because it will make the patient experience so totally different, more like retail and unlike a hospital system.
Yeah, and I mean, the labor force is not what it was, pre-COVID, right? And there's a lot of people that just don't want to work in this industry. So we have to fill those positions in some capacity. Sure. Right. So why not use technology and make those that do work with us, make them more efficient, right? So that as we continue to grow, we don't have to worry about finding new talent or new staff. We can really hone in on who we have and really broaden their skills, right? Make them stronger, make them more efficient.
Love that.
Yeah, like revenue cycle. It was huge, right? It's always been a very large piece of any practice. But now we have people that have been in the business 20 plus years. They're getting ready to retire. No one's going into billing.
Right. There's no college degree.
There's no college degree. These are all on the job training, individuals, and there's no program or no curriculum out there that says, hey, you're going to be a college, a physician biller or a healthcare biller coder. I mean, there are coding classes, but so we're facing this kind of crisis of how do we manage a very large accounts receivable, make sure we get paid in a faster time period, especially when the insurance carriers are, down coding every office visit. They need pre-authorization for any type of procedure, regardless surgical or not. It's just taking much more effort, and the only way you can do that right now, before technology came along, was to hire more staff.
Right.
And so then your expense line goes up. So we've touched every other expense line, and we've been very smart and been able to decrease it, but our expense ratio continues to climb because we have to continue to hire employees.
Sure.
And there are employees that are only working at 50% based upon, 10 years ago, you got 110% out of everyone, most of your staff.
Including time off, right? And they have PTO, they have vacation, they have sick days, and not that that's wrong, but it's just the nature of human employees, right?
It always seems to happen at the same time. Everybody gets sick at the same time, right? It's kind of a feast or famine situation a lot of times.
And we have a ton of tenured staff. I bet out of our 540 staff, I bet over 100 staff members have been there greater than 20 years or close to 20 years. So there's 6 to 8 weeks of vacation time they're taking off every single year. If you add that up, that's equivalent to 10 additional employees. So it's like you're going to hire 10 employees just to cover vacation time. You can't do it.
Can't.
And the staff that we have they're not willing to pick up the extra work.
And we see it in the call center a lot, right? People get hurt on the weekend. So they're flooding the call center first thing Monday morning,
in an
right?
orthopedic setting.
Yeah, in an orthopedic setting. So, we'll get 1,100 calls, in no time at all. But that's not the case on Friday. So, we as administrators have to figure out how to staff for busyness on a Monday, but
you go from tachycardia to,
so you have to staff for both because you can't
Interesting. Those unique challenges based on specialty and need and everything else.
And every specialty is a little different, but everyone wants to see their doctor Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Fridays, maybe Fridays just because it's before the weekend. They can have a little bit of a long weekend, take an afternoon appointment. But you have these ebb and flows, and then you've overstaffed in all of your other departments because you just never can predict what the volume is going to look like. So then you're trying to find some project for them to do.
Makes sense.
So it doesn't make, so we need technology to help us better manage the downtime and to maximize the busiest times.
Yeah, I love it. So connecting these two general thoughts, right? Love the stories of you guys' background. Being in the weeds, doing the work, getting your hands dirty, I think you said, being comfortable with being uncomfortable, right? I love those principles. They're things that I talk to my team about on the regular. So how do you take where your roots started, right, and apply it to some of the problems that you just posed now, right? A lot of it's technology, it's automation, it's cost, it's in the ratio you just explained of staff versus revenue.
Right.
How do you take your earlier learnings, right, of being uncomfortable and being in the grind and apply it to solving these larger, more progressive problems, maybe more technology focused that you're facing now?
But as we were looking at platforms, we have the knowledge base to ask the right questions. So it's not just like, we want you, because you're going to solve one problem of ours.
Right.
So we really have been over the past year and a half, and I think there's not an administrator or CEO out there or COO not trying to do the same thing. And everyone ends up with multiple platforms. And we have made just the decision to stop chasing. It's not worth our energy to chase. I'd much rather create a relationship with a company that can provide the technology that we need, even if it's not developed yet. Like, we want to be able to say, use our expertise with that vendor or that organization and go, this is what's missing. Maybe you don't put it on your roadmap today, but it's down the road. And we feel comfortable because we're willing to wait, because the quality of what you're providing today is amazing. So it's the technology to come is going to be even better, because as technology continues to advance, which seems to be daily these days, you can do more and more without, people. And I think that's how having experience and getting your hands dirty, you can, when you present to a vendor presents to you, you can ask the questions, and 50% of them you can weed out. Probably 80% of them you can weed out very quickly, because they only have the surface level. They don't know the bigger issues that exist.
Yeah, or they're only solving one problem, right? So you still have to tack that system onto another system, solving a greater problem. So to make healthcare work, and you have to have 8 different systems to make one system work, and all of these legacy platforms that are a little bit older, built on older technology. AI is the buzzword right now, so they're harping on that, and they're pulling in AI as widgets, as little tools, and it's creating a Jenga tower, right? They're just stacking more and more on top of each other, and it's becoming unstable. And we as administrators are constantly evaluating different platforms, and if we can knock that Jenga tower over, work with a company like this that we can know that technology is the foundation, and build something strong on one single tool there, we can, administrators, work on mentoring our staff. We don't have to spend time evaluating different platforms that they may demo 10 different tools for us, but based on our system, they may only actually integrate with, six of those may actually work. So we're constantly frustrated in, evaluating all these different tools, because we were sold on a product that exists. The company is selling it. They're not lying to us, but in our environment, it doesn't work in the way that they're telling us that it does. So we get frustrated, and a year, 2 years later, we're kicking them out and bringing in the next one that's doing the exact same thing, because they're selling us on 10 different things.
Or they're raising the price.
Or they're raising the prices.
Because, they have leverage now. Because everybody wants it. So the early adopters got a very cheap deal. And then when their contract is up a year later, all of a sudden it's 3 times. And that was just a comment made by a CEO in orthopedics. She was very on top of AI, and she started a scribe system and worked beautifully with her system. They started out, I think, a very small number, like $100 a month. When the renewal came, it was now $500 per physician per month. And so she was like, I'm getting rid of it. And the physicians now are frustrated because they're used to the technology. They want the technology. And now she's scouring the world trying to find something that's reasonably priced, that has the quality of her first company.
Yeah. So can you find that balance, right? Can you find a progressive partner that you can co-develop with, that's more of a singular platform like we talked about, but at the same time have a trustworthy partner that wouldn't do what you just described on a pricing.
Yeah. It's all about partnership. We are, codependent on each other. We have to be. And we want to be with somebody that's going to evaluate us as well as we evaluate them.
Sure.
And you need that relationship, the person that's the founder or developer of that relationship, to be futuristic in healthcare. Healthcare is drastically changing. And if they're not thinking ahead, 10 years ahead or 5 years ahead, or just anticipating what the changes are coming out of legislation, then the systems that you buy today, you're going to replace in 3 years. And I think that, so that's very important to me, is the integrity of the company and then the vision of the company. And if the vision is just today, which most of them are, hey, we can have AI agents answer your scheduling calls. That's all we're thinking about. But that's not really the big issue. The big issue is, how do we scale this at every level? Scale down, scale up, and making sure that we have the latest technology and it's working to better serve our communities and our patients.
Very well said. Love that. So with where it's at now, right? There's 6 practices and then 11 PT locations as well in Raleigh's current format. You talked a lot about partnering with technology, kind of downscaling in certain areas to upskill in others. Where do you see the future of Raleigh And again, like, what does that roadmap look like for you? Is it growth? Is it additional clinics? If so, like, how do you process it? What is your process of analyzing growth, when to do it, where to do it? How does that process look for you guys?
Definitely data. And Ross has definitely focused most of his energy on data and just hired an optimization person to handle kind of the technical platforms that we are bringing on board.
Yeah.
And so we're looking at data, analyzing it, determining, do we need more physicians? We have a same day, next day kind of rule that Ross and I kind of created as far as patients getting into the clinics. Through urgent cares, we changed it that our patients will only see a new patient will only see a surgeon, because the premium for healthcare is so high that they should only see a surgeon or a certified physician.
Sure.
And a lot of mid-levels may not be happy with that conversation or that answer. I'm not saying they're not qualified. I'm just saying if I'm going to go buy a BMW, then don't show me a Nissan. Like, I want the BMW. And then if I say, oh, it's too expensive, I don't want that car anymore, I'd rather have the cheaper car. The Nissan was a perfectly fine car, and I can then buy that. But don't, especially in a subspecialty where you're trying to figure out, do you need surgery? Do you have cancer? You want the best of the best giving you those answers.
Yeah.
So working on just really being patient-centered and giving them what they deserve, making sure physicians stay on time, because we all value our time. So it's just the generations have forced us to be a little bit different than we were 20 years years ago or 30 years ago, where it was like, you could wait in my waiting room for 3 hours. I don't really care. You came to see me. It's my time. And that's not the case. We do scorecards on physicians, and we highlight to each physician what their challenges are on the physician level to make sure that their patients, that their volume continues to grow.
Yeah, I mean, access is everything. We have 24/7 scheduling capabilities, currently, and we'll see patients that are self-scheduling on a Sunday night for an appointment Monday morning, but then putting themselves on a wait list to be seen sooner. Their appointment's in 12 hours, but they want to be seen in 9. And if they can find a practice, 10 miles up the road that can get them in at 9, they're going to abandon you and go out to your competitor. So, access is everything. We need to get the patients in the door. And then that's where we have to rely on our physicians to be of the utmost quality to keep those patients coming back to us. Technology and automation is not new. I mean, Ford's been using robots in their plants since the 60s, so how can we follow that same pathway of using technology, using machines to do machine tasks, and then allowing our people to focus on other people, and really focus on that quality and that connection. So, technology is a great way to do those odd tasks that people don't want to do and don't need to do.
And we don't need to be bigger. People think size is important. It's you grow as you need to grow. So there's no defined, like we define, if a patient's waiting a week or 2 weeks in a certain subspecialty, then that's when we start to recruit. Because we know by the time we recruit a year down the road, because we're very particular on the physicians that we hire and the fellowships that they complete, we know we're going to be in a huge area of long wait times to get in to be seen, and they're going to end up at a different practice. So, looking at data, looking at zip code analysis, everything is based on data right now. It's not gut anymore. It used to be intuition, gut, like, okay, I think we need somebody new, or we need to open this department. It actually is looking at the data, seeing what's the abandonment rate. Is it above 20% on a Monday morning? If it is, we have a problem. We have to solve that problem. And how do we do it? With technology or with employees?
Yeah.
So that data is huge.
Love that. So apply that to the provider side, right? You guys are in the administration side. That's how you see it. You look at the numbers. I'm sure you share some of this context with them.
Right.
What do you feel like the pulse is for the provider side on technology, right? I've talked to hundreds and thousands of them across the country. Some love it. Some are very progressive. Right. Others are very fearful. What's the pulse in your practice in general on the technology side, and how, again, if you partner with the technology platform, how do you balance
We
right?
have 4
The different-
generations.
Okay.
So that's a challenge, right?
Okay.
So you have the 60 plus, and then you have the 31, and then the 2 generations in the middle. So that's just in itself a big challenge.
Right.
But I think, what Ross has done is been very particular about rolling out products to the younger physicians, getting them on board, or to the more technology-driven physicians. And they are the people that actually recruit the other generations in, because they're seeing, oh, well, if he can do that and he can go home at 5:30 every night because his note is done because he's using Scribe, AI Scribe, I want that. But they were scared of it in the beginning.
Right. They didn't want to be the initial.
They didn't want to do it because it was going to slow them down because they're efficient orthopedic surgeons.
And they're all very competitive too, right?
They're extremely competitive. But I think Ross's philosophy of let's take it slow, not just throw everybody on a product, show the value of the product, and then I think you get buy-in from everyone. Yeah, is that your experience?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And having that physician champion is great because their peers are going to listen to them. And again, they're very competitive, so that they're seeing same amount of patients, but one physician's taking 3 hours of notes home to work on, where the other one's spending time with their family, and that's the outside. But on the inside as well, the providers are able to spend more face-to-face contact with their patients, right? So patients are happier too because they feel like they're being valued. Again, it's about having machines do machine tasks or automated tasks. So you can really focus on who's in front of you.
Yeah, and we take patient satisfaction very seriously because it's not just a tool just to have a number. It actually is. It gives us a good barometer on, do we really have a problem? We post on our website all of our patient satisfaction data, whether good or bad. We have a marketing team that monitors the bad, that presents a report to us, and then Ross and I will talk about how do we make this better. If it's in his operational departments, if it's my departments that I oversee directly, we'll talk about what can we do to fix this. Because if your patient satisfaction, when I first got to Raleigh Ortho, it was 3.6 to 3.8. We range 4.9 to 5.0. So we've made great strides over the past 7 years in patient satisfaction because we started monitoring it. And it wasn't somebody just upset going on to Google and being able to leave a bad review. Right. We actually were able to let all the patients. So every new patient that comes into our practice gets a patient satisfaction survey 5 minutes after they check out. So if you've had a bad experience, you're probably not going to rate us well.
And it's fresh on their mind because it's right after it happened.
And they're willing to leave comments. And those are the things that we want to see, because there are things we're not at the front desk every day. We're not in the clinical areas every single day or every minute of the day. So we miss a lot of this. We have a complaint hotline. So if patients are upset, they get a C-suite person to talk to. That we don't give it to some billing manager or some mid-level manager. We take the calls. And people will say, why do you take those types of calls? Because that's how we fix our organization.
Love that.
Yeah, you have angry patients all the time that I want to speak to your supervisor. Well, sir, I am the supervisor.
Of all the supervisors, actually.
Okay.
I think he said he was the CEO once with a challenging patient.
Yeah, he was out of the office one day. Yeah, he was out of the office for vacation or something like that. So, there was no escalating beyond me at that point. So I told him, I was like, yep, you're talking to him. And, it changes, right? Because
it's absolutely
because
hysterical.
They're talking to someone that has the ability to make an impact on what they just experienced.
But that response I love because that's atypical, right? They don't get access to someone who they think can actually make an impact on their experience, and once they do, it's like, oh, I actually don't know what to say, but it's awesome that you're empowering people to share what's not going well, focusing on that, and then seeing objective change.
Some of it's kind of it's their expectations, which is something that we would never meet. Right. But we try to at least get them to understand why that we didn't do what we did, or their relationship with that provider, they didn't connect, which is happens. There are physicians that have bedside manners and some that don't have bedside manners, or have a lot of questions or don't have a lot of questions. And we try to get the people to the right provider. So if somebody says, "Oh, I didn't like this provider," and so the questions are, what do you want out of a provider? And then what we do is we'll match them with somebody else in the practice and let them have a different experience. And our physicians they don't dislike that. They actually like that.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, same. Like when I was practicing, I'd much rather have someone that meshed or matched well with my personality, my background, my tendencies, right? Compared to trying to fit someone who didn't and forcing an issue and then having a negative experience on both ends. So that's data, driven by data.
That's the solution to growth. Is your patients or your marketing staff. We have dedicated marketing staff, but the patients typically will tell everyone that they know they've had a good experience.
They're the number one referral source.
Yes.
They are. And so we have to treat them that way.
Love that. So direct to consumer, right? So direct to consumer versus, and you did mention earlier that you do have, physician referral sources as well, but you would say the majority of the patient load that you have in your community at this time is direct to consumer, word of mouth. Again, you have a marketing agency. They're going more directly to patients, not to other physician groups.
But the patients also go back to their primary care and rave about the experience that they've had, which is so not unique in healthcare.
Right.
So those primary care physicians send more patients because we make sure we give the primary care what they need to be able to know that their patient was seen and what the plan and assessment is. And the patients are happy, so they're telling people the primary care is sending more patients. So the better the patient experience is, it's your strategy for growth.
Yeah, and two, we have a lot of great relationships with physicians outside of our organization. So whenever they're treating their patients with an issue, they're like, "Oh, hey, I actually know somebody. My mother sees this doctor. My mother goes to this practice. My son was seen here. Let me send you here as well because I have direct experience. And in fact, let me go one step further. Let me call Ross. Let me call Brian because I know them. Or let me call Dr. So-and-so because I know them."
Yeah, and in your scale, right, it's amazing. You're as big as you are, but you never, ever, ever compromise those fundamental,
not at all,
foundational standards because it's what helped create where you are today.
Yes.
And I love the fact that you can continue to scale, you can continue to grow. Growth is subjective based on how you want to define it, but you're never going to go away from the community-based trust, face-to-face relationship type of approach that helps you be a part of the community that you actually practice in.
And it reinforces your brand.
Yeah.
Love that.
I mean, you said the perfect word right there, relationships, right? And no matter where we're working with vendors or working with patients, it's all about that relationship.
Yeah.
We have vendors that we work with that I brought from Florida because it's a good relationship. They know my business, I know their business, a little bit of each. And we trust each other, and when we make a mistake, we say, "Hey, we made a mistake. It's okay. We can fix it together rather than by ourselves." And those are people that you keep around.
Yeah.
The people that just sell the widgets, they're gone. They're gone in a year.
Right.
With new technology, or they've changed jobs or the platform's no longer relevant. There's a lot of bad deals being done right now in the technology space, and I just don't think people are educated enough to know what questions to ask because they didn't go through the system.
Yes.
They don't have the experience. They don't know what questions.
I love that. Brings it full circle, right? Starts kind of on our initial talk track of your stories, your backgrounds, how you got to where you're at now, and then bringing it full circle to say, hey, that's how you make informed decisions about the future of your practice as it currently stands now, especially with how fast things are moving from a technology standpoint.
Right.
It's very true. And, we have 2 national organizations that we are highlighted. We're in the top 3 in orthopedic private practices within the United States. And that's something to be said. And that is
amazing.
It's everyone working together as a team, physicians, staff, administration, making sure that patients are at the center of it. And I think we'll continue to be in that top 3 rating, regardless of how many physicians we have, just based upon what we provide versus what other practices don't provide.
Love it. Patient-centric care, right? Put patients first, everything else falls into place. Yeah. Unfortunately, I don't think that a lot of businesses and practices have that mindset, and they're not seeing the same results as you all as a result.
They've had bad mentors.
Bad mentors. This is the theme, right?
Yeah.
I love the mentorship theme.
Yeah.
I love the relationship theme. It's been amazing to hear your stories, understand a little bit more about how you got to where you're at now, but also how, again, what the future looks like, how you can make informed decisions using data to help your practice continue to stay in the forefront.
Still exciting.
It's amazing.
The challenges make it exciting.
Yeah.
And overcoming some of the challenges that we are facing is going to make a huge difference.
Yeah, and partnering with a company that's at the forefront of innovation and, has that vision for the future of healthcare, it's going to revolutionize the whole healthcare space, not just in our specialty, but healthcare in general. Because, a lot of what we do does translate to other specialties as well.
Yeah.
Any physician group or any medical practice, they're all treating patients. So it doesn't matter what issue for. So
Love it. Well, I've sincerely enjoyed our conversation. Appreciate both of you taking the time to sit down with us and discuss your story, your journey, and where you're at now. And hope to connect soon again.
Thank you.
thanks for having us.